The Dog Who Waited. In a quiet little town, nestled between rolling hills and tall whispering trees, there lived an old golden retriever named Max. He had thick, shaggy fur that had once been the color of sunshine, though it had faded to a softer, silvery gold over the years. His eyes, still warm and full of life, carried the wisdom of 1,000 sunrises and the love of one little girl who meant the world to him. Max wasn't a puppy anymore. He didn't chase squirrels like he used to, and stairs had become more of a challenge than an adventure. But there was one thing that never changed: his loyalty. Max belonged to Lily. She was just 3 years old when her parents brought Max home from the shelter. He had been the smallest of the litter, with a tail that never stopped wagging and a heart too big for his tiny paws. From the moment they met, Lily and Max had been inseparable. They had grown up side by side. Max had patiently endured tea parties with teddy bears, the occasional glitter bow stuck in his fur, and more dress-up sessions than he could count. In return, Lily had spent countless hours brushing his coat, telling him stories, and curling up beside him when storms rolled in. When Lily got older, life got busier. There were dance classes and school projects, friends and sleepovers. Still, Max waited by the door every day at 4 p.m., ready to greet her with his wagging tail and soulful eyes. She always greeted him with the same smile and said the same thing: "Hi, Max. I missed you." Then came the day she had to leave. It was a late summer morning, the kind where the air still smelled like honeysuckle and the crickets sang in the grass. Suitcases were packed, hugs were exchanged, and promises were made. Lily knelt down beside Max, burying her face in his fur. "I'll miss you, old boy," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Be good. I'll be back before you know it." Max licked her cheek, his tail thumping softly against the porch. After the car disappeared down the road, Max sat by the gate, waiting. At first, he waited because he expected her to return that evening. Then the days turned into weeks, and still he came to the gate every afternoon at exactly 4 o'clock. Neighbors took notice. Some would bring him treats or sit with him for a while. "Still waiting for your girl, huh?" Mr. Jensen from across the street would say with a smile, scratching Max behind the ears. Max would wag his tail in response, eyes always scanning the road. The seasons changed. Autumn painted the trees with fire. Winter wrapped the town in snow. Spring brought new flowers, and summer made the pavement warm beneath his paws. Through it all, Max waited. He had grown slower, a little stiffer. The fur around his muzzle was almost white now, and he slept more than he used to. But every day at 4 p.m., he still found the strength to make his way to the gate. Then one day, something was different. It was a warm spring afternoon. The cherry blossoms were dancing in the wind, and the scent of fresh-cut grass hung in the air. Max was dozing in the sun when he heard the familiar rumble of a car pulling into the driveway. His ears perked up. His tail gave a hopeful thump. The car door opened, and there she was, Lily. Taller, older, her hair tied back in a messy bun, and a college sweatshirt hanging off one shoulder. But her eyes were the same, and the second she saw him, they filled with tears. "Max!" she cried, running toward him. Max didn't feel old anymore. He didn't feel stiff or tired. He ran, really ran, for the first time in years. His legs wobbled, but his heart led the way. When they met in the middle of the yard, she dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around him. "I missed you so much," she whispered into his fur. He licked her face again and again, his tail wagging so hard it stirred the petals on the grass. That night, Max curled up beside her on the couch, just like they used to do. Lily wrapped a blanket around them both, and they watched the stars through the window. Max sighed deeply, resting his head on her lap. He had waited, and she had come back. And in that quiet, perfect moment, everything in the world felt right again. Harold and the Blue Bicycle. Harold was 78 when he rediscovered the old blue bicycle buried beneath dusty tarps and forgotten lawn chairs in the far corner of his garage, half covered in a wrinkled sheet and quietly rusting around the pedals, its once glossy frame now dulled with time and weather. He hadn't gone looking for anything in particular that morning, just a screwdriver to fix a stubborn drawer. But there it was, as if waiting patiently, tucked away like a long-lost memory. It belonged to his late wife, Ruth, who used to ride it to the Saturday markets with a wide wicker basket strapped to the handlebars, her silver curls bouncing under a wide straw hat, always returning with fresh bread, wildflowers, and stories about who she ran into. Harold remembered how she'd ring the bell just before she turned into the driveway, and he'd step outside with 2 mugs of tea to meet her as if it were a ritual the world depended on. After she passed away 8 years earlier, he couldn't bring himself to go into the garage often. It was too quiet in there, too full of things that still smelled like her. Garden gloves with a trace of rosemary, boots with tiny pebbles stuck in the soles, paintbrushes she used for flower pots and birdhouses. But that morning, something in him shifted. Maybe the sunlight falling just right across the handlebars, or maybe a memory gentle enough to open the door a little wider than usual. He wheeled the bike into the driveway, squinting in the light, and gave it a long look. The tires were flat, the bell stuck, the chain stiff, but the bones were still there, solid and hopeful. He fetched the old red toolbox from the shed, dusted off a rag, and got to work. For hours, he tinkered with quiet focus, oiling the chain, tightening the brakes, wiping away specks of rust, and gently scrubbing the frame until the blue peeked through like shy spring sky. He pumped the tires, polished the handlebars, and even tied a bit of fresh ribbon to the basket, the same way Ruth used to do, only this one was yellow instead of lavender. The next morning, wearing his oldest sneakers, a cap with a faded fishing logo, and a sense of curiosity he hadn't felt in years, Harold wheeled the bicycle down to the sidewalk. He hesitated for a moment, gripping the handlebars tightly, feeling a flutter of nerves he hadn't known since learning to ride as a boy, then swung his leg over and pushed off. The first few turns of the pedals were awkward. His balance was rusty, and his knees protested with every rotation, but he laughed out loud at himself, wobbling past Mrs. Feldman's garden gnomes and nearly steering into a hedge. But with each block, it got easier, like muscle and memory waking up from a long nap. He turned a slow loop through the neighborhood, feeling the wind on his cheeks, and pedaled all the way to Willow Park, where he leaned the bicycle against a bench, sat beneath the oak trees, and shared his sandwich with the ducks. It became a quiet tradition. Every morning, Harold would ride, sometimes just around the block, sometimes all the way to the river trail. He began packing a little lunch, a thermos of tea, a book of Ruth's favorite poetry, and some breadcrumbs. He started reading aloud to the breeze, softly reciting Yeats, Dickinson, or Mary Oliver, his voice low and steady, as if speaking to the clouds, or maybe to Ruth herself. One afternoon, as he passed the playground on his way back, a little girl with two messy braids and a pink helmet pedaled up beside him on her tricycle. "Can I ride with you?" she asked brightly, looking up with wide eyes. Harold blinked in surprise, then grinned. "Of course," he said, slowing his pace to match hers. They did a slow loop around the block, chatting about ducks and stickers and her favorite color, which changed daily, before she turned into her driveway and waved goodbye. The following Saturday, she was waiting by the sidewalk with her trike, and this time, she brought a friend. The week after that, 5 more joined. Soon, every Saturday morning, Harold found himself leading a small parade of children down Maple Street, their bikes adorned with streamers, horns, and bells, their laughter ringing through the neighborhood like music. The local paper caught wind of it and ran a small feature. Harold and the Saturday Parade, with a photo of him smiling shyly beside a dozen kids, his blue bicycle at the front like a banner. People started calling it the Harold Parade, and the name stuck. Parents would bring lawn chairs to their front yards to watch, some holding coffee mugs, others waving with both hands, and sometimes entire families joined in with strollers, scooters, or dogs on leashes. Harold became something of a legend, not because he tried to be, but because people could feel the goodness in him, the quiet kindness, the joy he gave without asking for anything back. The town slowly wrapped him in appreciation. The corner bakery began handing out tiny scones to the kids after each ride. A retired teacher brought chalk for sidewalk doodles at the park. Someone knitted Harold a wool scarf with blue and white stripes and left it in his mailbox with a note that read, "To the most gentle leader we know." On his 79th birthday, the entire parade stopped at the town square, where the children gathered around and sang to him, slightly out of tune, but with so much heart that Harold had to blink away tears behind his sunglasses. One of the parents handed him a large card filled with notes and crayon drawings, bikes, ducks, stars, and lots of little hearts, and someone had even baked a cake shaped like a bicycle. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Harold sat on the park bench, the sky painted in soft orange and rose, the blue bicycle resting nearby, its basket now filled with thank you cards and fresh-picked daisies. He looked out across the pond, where the ducks floated peacefully, and closed his eyes, letting the cool breeze graze his face. He imagined Ruth sitting beside him again, laughing softly, her hand in his, her voice in the rustle of the trees. "You'd love this," he whispered. "You always did believe in ordinary magic." From that point on, rain or shine, Harold continued his Saturday rides, always showing up, always with the same warm smile and steady pace, leading the children with gentle purpose. He added a little speaker to the basket that played soft classical music or old jazz standards, and sometimes the kids would sing along as they pedaled behind him. The bike, once a forgotten relic of grief, had become something so much more, an emblem of joy, of resilience, of the kind of love that doesn't fade with time. And long after the leaves fell and bloomed again, long after the kids grew taller and faster, and the ribbons faded under sun and wind, Harold and his blue bicycle remained a cherished part of the town's rhythm. Every slow ride, every shared smile, every Saturday parade became a thread in the quiet, beautiful tapestry of a life still well lived. And in that steady turning of wheels and hearts, Harold proved something simple yet profound, that even after loss, after years, after quiet, joy can return, not as it was, but as something new, carried forward on two wheels, through laughter, under trees, with a bell that still rings like hope. The cat who stayed behind. After Charlie passed, the house fell quiet in a way Elsie had never known. She'd always known silence before, the peaceful hush of early mornings, the gentle stillness of twilight. But this was different. This was the silence of something missing. Charlie had been her soulmate, her steady hand, her soft laugh, her partner in every season of life. Now, the rooms they had filled together felt too large, the air too still. Their children, grown and scattered across cities and states, called often but couldn't be there every day. One afternoon, her daughter Sarah brought a gift. "This is Thomas," she said, placing a soft silver Persian cat onto the couch beside her mother. "He's quiet, like you. Maybe you two can look after each other." At first, Elsie wasn't sure. She'd never had a cat. But Thomas was different. He didn't demand or fuss. He simply was. With his plume of a tail and wise amber eyes, he moved through the house like he already belonged. By the end of the week, he had taken his place on the wide windowsill that overlooked the street, a patch of golden sun always waiting for him. Thomas became her shadow. He followed her from room to room, curling beside her as she knitted, resting on the counter as she stirred soup, brushing against her legs in the morning as she shuffled to make tea. At night, he would sleep at the foot of her bed, a silent sentinel. She talked to him about Charlie, about the life they'd built, about the dreams that still lingered in quiet corners of her mind. Sometimes she'd laugh at herself for speaking aloud, but Thomas always seemed to listen, blinking slowly, purring softly, warm and present. The neighbors came to love him too. Children waved to him from the street. Passers-by smiled when they saw his face pressed against the glass, watching the world go by. The postman once left him a note that said, "You've got more charm than the entire neighborhood." And then, one gentle morning, Elsie passed, peacefully, in her sleep. A half-finished cup of tea on the bedside table. A photo of Charlie on the dresser. The book she'd been reading folded neatly in her lap. The house sighed into stillness again. In the days that followed, as her children came to pack and clean and remember, Thomas vanished. There was no sign of him, no paw prints, no soft meow. They searched, posted flyers, called neighbors, but Thomas was gone. Some assumed he'd gone off to grieve in his own way, as cats sometimes do. Others whispered, half smiling through their sadness, that maybe he had followed Elsie, that he'd been hers, entirely, and now his time was done. But Thomas hadn't left. Not really. He was waiting. In the weeks that followed, he lived like a ghost of the home, quiet, hidden, patient. He slept under the porch during the day, curled into a dusty shadow, his ears twitching at every sound. At night, he slinked through the empty rooms, padding across the wooden floors that still held the echoes of laughter and music. He brushed against the old curtains, pawed open a door here and there, and returned faithfully to the windowsill, watching the world without being seen. When rain fell, he stayed dry beneath the eaves, and when the sun returned, he warmed himself on the back steps, just like he used to beside Elsie's rocking chair. He didn't roam far. The house was still hers, and it felt wrong to leave it behind. He waited, with the quiet certainty only animals seem to possess, for something new, something right. Days turned to weeks. The garden grew wild. The mailbox stayed empty. but Thomas waited. And then, one spring morning, a car pulled into the driveway. The house had sold. A young family spilled out of the vehicle, laughing, tired, a little overwhelmed. Two small children ran through the gate, tumbling into the garden as their parents unlocked the door. A golden retriever barked excitedly, tail wagging, ears flopping. Thomas watched it all from beneath the hydrangea bush. His amber eyes blinked once, twice. He stretched, slow and deliberate, then quietly padded up the porch steps. The mother noticed him first. "There's a cat on the porch," she said, surprised. The children squealed with joy. The dog barked again, then curiously sniffed at the calm, unbothered feline. Thomas sat down in front of the door, tail curling around his paws. He looked at the children, then at the mother. Then he gave a low, rumbling purr, his version of a handshake. They let him in. It was as if he'd never left. He wandered through the kitchen, leapt onto the windowsill with ease, and lay down as though claiming his place once again. The family laughed, tried to find where he belonged, but no one stepped forward. No microchip, no collar. Only a story from the neighbors. That cat used to live here, with the lady who passed. They took it as a sign, maybe even a blessing. Thomas had waited. Now, with tiny feet pattering across the floors and the warm hum of new life in the old home, he had found his purpose again. The young boy loved reading aloud to him. The little girl shared her afternoon toast. Even the dog, once confused, now curled beside him on the rug like an old friend. Each day, Thomas returned to his sunny window. He watched the world go by, just as he always had. Same spot. New voices. New love. But if you looked closely, in the golden hours of late afternoon, you might see him turn his head slightly, as if listening for a familiar voice in another room, as if remembering the soft hands that once brushed his fur and whispered secrets meant only for him. Because Thomas hadn't just been a pet. He had been a companion, a keeper of memories, a silent witness to love and grief and the enduring heartbeat of home. He had stayed behind, and now the house had a family again, and he had someone new to watch over. Some souls never leave. They simply wait for love to return. Sheba of the southern paddocks. Sheba was born on a cool September morning beneath the old gum tree behind the shearing shed. The runt of the litter, but the first to stand, her tiny paws wobbling on the flattened grass as she tried to explore the world with eyes that weren't even open yet. She belonged to the Jacobs family, who had run their sheep farm in the southern hills for generations. And from the moment little Sheba tumbled out into the light, old Jack Jacobs said, "She's a keeper, that one." And he was right. Sheba grew up chasing dust motes and sunbeams, always underfoot and always alert. She followed Jack everywhere, from the chook pen to the tractor, from the dairy shed to the creek. And by the time she was 6 months old, she knew every corner of the property better than most humans ever would. She learned fast, picking up hand signals, whistles, and instinct from her mother Tess, a retired herder who watched her daughter with approving eyes and the occasional playful nip. Sheba was bright, eager, and fearless. By the time she was a year old, she was leading the morning runs, circling the sheep with graceful speed, weaving left and right with that classic border collie intensity. Her eyes focused, her body low to the ground, a black and white streak through the golden fields. She loved the work, the adrenaline of the chase, the satisfaction of guiding the flock exactly where Jack needed them to be. But she loved the quiet moments too, sitting beside Jack on the back porch at dusk, watching the sky turn orange and pink as the sun slipped behind the hills. Jack talked to her like she was a person, and Sheba listened like she understood every word. "You're my right hand, girl," he'd say, scratching behind her ears. "Don't know what I'd do without you." They had a rhythm, the two of them. Every morning started with a whistle and the clang of the gate, and Sheba would be up and ready, trotting behind Jack's boots, eager to take on whatever the day had in store. Some days were simple, moving sheep from one paddock to another, checking the fences, feeding the cattle. Other days were adventures. Like the time a thunderstorm rolled in early, and the younger sheep panicked and broke through the fencing near the river bend. Jack slipped in the mud, trying to corral them, and Sheba, soaked and muddy, raced through the rising waters, barking instructions like a general on the battlefield, rounding up the sheep one by one and guiding them to higher ground. When Jack finally caught up, breathless and drenched, he looked at her with such pride he could barely speak. "You just saved a lot of them, girl," he said, wrapping his arms around her wet neck. "You clever, clever dog." Then there was the day a wild fox got into the henhouse. Jack didn't notice at first. He was fixing a broken fence post on the east side, but Sheba did. She took off like a flash, leaping the fence in a single bound, barking bloody murder until Jack came running. By the time he arrived, the fox was retreating into the bush, and Sheba was standing guard over a rattled but safe bunch of hens, feathers flying everywhere. Jack laughed for 10 minutes straight, then gave her 2 eggs and a leftover sausage from breakfast. And there were quieter adventures too. The times Jack and Sheba would ride out in the old Land Rover, just the two of them, and a thermos of tea, checking the far paddocks, or visiting the old windmill Jack had built with his father when he was a boy. Sheba always rode in the front seat, paws on the dash, nose twitching at every scent that drifted through the open window. On winter mornings, she'd nuzzle close to Jack's leg, sharing warmth as he sipped from the steaming mug and told her stories about days gone by. She was there for every lambing season, gently nudging newborns to their feet and lying beside orphaned ones to keep them warm. She was there when Jack's grandson broke his arm, climbing the hay bales, alerting the family with frantic barking and leading them straight to where he'd fallen. She was there when Jack's wife, Molly, passed away, curled silently at the foot of the bed, her eyes full of understanding, her presence a comfort that needed no words. In the years that followed, Sheba grew slower, but she never lost her spirit. Her black fur turned silver around her muzzle, and her sprints became careful trots, but her eyes still sparkled with mischief and loyalty. She would sit on the porch beside Jack each evening, her head resting against his boot, both of them staring out at the land they loved, sharing the silence of 2 lives deeply intertwined. Then, one chilly autumn morning, Jack didn't come out to greet her. The screen door stayed shut. The usual clang of boots on the steps was missing. Sheba waited and waited. The door eventually opened, but it wasn't Jack. It was his daughter Ellie, tears in her eyes as she knelt down and pulled Sheba into a hug. "He's gone, girl," she whispered, burying her face in Sheba's thick fur. "He's with Mum now." The farm was quieter after that. Ellie and her husband moved in to keep things running. The grandkids came more often, their laughter chasing away the stillness. Sheba, though older and grayer, still made her rounds, slower now, but just as loyal. She claimed her place on the porch again, and every evening she watched the sunset just as she had with Jack. One warm spring day, after a morning spent watching over lambs and sharing toast crusts with the youngest grandchild, Sheba wandered to the gum tree where she had been born. She lay down beneath its dappled shade, the breeze soft through the grass, the sky blue and endless above her. She looked out across the paddocks she had run her whole life, gave one final wag of her tail, and closed her eyes. They found her there the next morning, peaceful, her paws stretched toward the open fields. They buried her beneath the tree with her old collar and a photo of Jack tucked gently into the earth beside her. They planted a flowering gum tree next to her grave, its red blossoms blooming bright each year, just like her spirit. And though Sheba was gone, her legacy lived on. In the echo of a whistle across the hills, in the patter of paws from a new pup named Bella learning to herd, and in the stories the family told of the dog who had been more than a farmhand. She had been a friend, a protector, a legend, the heart of the southern paddocks. The house that built her. Emma stood at the edge of the gravel driveway, the late afternoon sun casting long golden shadows across the familiar yard. The crunch beneath her boots was a sound from another lifetime, one that echoed with the memories of bare feet, hopscotch chalk, and the easy laughter of her younger self. The house before her hadn't changed much. White clapboard siding, a wraparound porch with a faded swing creaking gently in the breeze, and the massive old oak tree standing guard beside the driveway like it had for generations. Even the wind chimes on the porch still tinkled the same delicate tune that her mother used to hum while hanging laundry on the line. But Emma had changed. She was no longer the girl who once laid on that porch at night, counting stars and imagining a big life far beyond the sleepy village of Fernwhistle. She was a woman now, worn in the ways life tends to wear you, but stronger, wiser. And she wasn't alone. Her husband, Ryan, stepped beside her, lacing his fingers with hers, grounding her with the quiet strength he always carried. Their two children, Sophie and Noah, were already out of the car, running toward the swing like it had always belonged to them. Sophie squealed with delight as Noah gave her a big push, and for a moment, time folded in on itself. It was like watching a reflection of her own childhood. "This is the house?" Ryan asked gently, his eyes scanning the structure that had lived so vividly in her stories. Emma nodded, her throat too full to speak. Her chest swelled with something between joy and ache. She had promised herself she'd return one day. She was 18 when her family lost this house. Her father, a proud man who built it with her grandfather's calloused hands, had fought tooth and nail to keep it. But after the factory closed and the bills piled up, it became too much. The mortgage won. They packed their lives into boxes and left the only home they'd ever known. Emma remembered sitting in the back seat of that moving truck, fists clenched, eyes red. She had whispered a promise she repeated 1,000 times since. One day, I'll buy it back. One day, I'll bring them home. And so, she worked. She took scholarships, worked late-night shifts through college, and poured every ounce of herself into building something real. There were sacrifices, holidays missed, burnout, setbacks, but she never let go of that promise. She met Ryan in her mid-20s, fell in love slowly and deeply, and shared her dream with him on their third date. He believed in her, even before she had much to show for it. They married, bought a small house in the suburbs, and had 2 kids. And even then, between ballet recitals and scraped knees and running a business, Emma never stopped quietly checking on the old house, hoping it would someday return to her. When the listing came up on a quiet Thursday afternoon, it felt like destiny. The house was still there, still whole, still waiting. Owned now by a kind older woman named Margaret, who'd lived there alone since her husband passed. When Emma contacted her and explained who she was, Margaret's voice softened. "I remember your parents," she said. "They were good people. When they sold the house, your mother gave me a photo of the oak tree, said it had watched over her babies like a gentle giant. She said, take care of her. She's more than just wooden windows." And I did. Then Margaret added quietly, "But I think the house has been waiting for you to come back." 2 weeks later, it was done. Signed, sealed, and hers. Today was the first time she had returned, not just as the girl who left, but as a mother, a wife, a daughter returning with more than she had ever imagined possible. That evening, she invited her parents for dinner. They had no idea where they were going. Her father grumbled something about traffic, and her mother asked for the 3rd time if she should bring a pie. When they turned into the familiar driveway, silence fell over the car. Her mother gasped first. Her father leaned forward in his seat, blinking slowly like he wasn't sure if his eyes could be trusted. "Emma," he whispered, "is this—" "I bought it back," she said softly. "It's ours again. I kept my promise." The silence broke. Her mother cried openly, her hands covering her mouth. Her father, always the quiet one, stepped out of the car and walked slowly to the porch, his hand trailing the railing as if reconnecting with an old friend. Inside, the house smelled faintly of fresh paint and new beginnings, but it still held the soul of the home they'd known. Her father sat in his old armchair, still there after all these years, restored and ready. Her mother stepped into the kitchen and laughed through her tears. "You kept the blue tiles," she said. "We laid these on our anniversary, remember?" Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma sat on the porch swing with Ryan, watching Sophie and Noah chase fireflies under the oak tree. Her parents sipped tea beside them, wrapped in blankets. The air was warm with laughter, filled with the crackling sound of an old record playing inside. "I used to dream about this moment," Emma said, resting her head on Ryan's shoulder. "I used to think that if I just got this house back, everything would feel whole again." "And does it?" he asked. She watched her son trip over his shoelaces, giggle, and roll in the grass. Her daughter shrieked with laughter. Her parents sat side by side like no time had passed at all. She smiled. "Yes," she whispered, "even more than I imagined." The house had waited. Through the seasons, through the silence, it had held their memories safe. Now, it would hold their future too. It wasn't just a homecoming. It was a continuation, a new chapter, written on the same familiar pages. The house that built her was building something new again, and this time, they were all home. The Corner Cup Cafe. On the quiet corner of Maple and 3rd sat a little cafe with ivy crawling up its brick walls and a hand-painted wooden sign that read, "The Corner Cup Cafe," in curling letters. The door jingled softly when it opened, and the windows always glowed golden from inside, casting warm light onto the sidewalk like a beacon. For anyone in need of a pause, the place smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread and had mismatched chairs, worn wooden floors, and shelves full of forgotten books. And every morning without fail, Lily arrived just after sunrise with her old golden retriever, Max padding, faithfully at her side, his graying muzzle pressed lovingly against her leg as they made their way to their usual table by the window. She always ordered a lavender tea and a blueberry scone, one for her, and a tiny plate of whipped cream just for Max, who waited patiently, tail thumping softly against the floor. Across the room sat Emma and Ryan, a couple in their 30s who had made the cafe their Saturday morning tradition since their first date 4 years ago. They always shared the window seat in the back and ordered one large latte with 2 straws and a cinnamon bun to split. They played word games on napkins and talked about dreams big and small, from weekend getaways to someday buying a little cottage by a lake. Near the bookshelf sat Elsie, elegant and quiet, always dressed in a soft cardigan with her silver Persian cat, Thomas draped across her lap like royalty. She carried a novel in her bag and a small tin of treats for Thomas, who only tolerated the occasional pat from staff, but purred like thunder when Elsie scratched behind his ears. And then, every Sunday around 10, the door would swing open with a cheerful jingle, and in would roll Harold, 78 and smiling, parking his blue bicycle gently beside the patio table and greeting everyone with a wave and a weather report. He wore a scarf year-round and always brought in a small thermos of cider to share with anyone who asked. Sometimes he'd play harmonica tunes on the bench outside while children danced or neighbors clapped along. And somehow, this mix of souls, each with their routines and quiet joys, blended into something special, like separate notes of a song that found harmony in the warm hum of coffee machines and soft jazz on the radio. Baristas knew their orders by heart. The regulars knew each other's names. And on rainy days, the cafe felt more like a living room than a business, with people sharing stories and umbrellas and the kind of kindness that didn't need a reason. One snowy December morning, Emma and Ryan surprised everyone by hanging up a handmade banner above the counter that read, "This place feels like home," and beneath it, they placed a basket of hand-knit mittens for anyone who needed them. Donated by Elsie, who had taken up knitting again, with Thomas occasionally swatting at the yarn, Lily brought in her favorite recipe for spiced apple muffins, which became a seasonal favorite. And Harold began leading slow rides and cider chats every Sunday afternoon for anyone who wanted to cruise gently through the park and talk about life or just ride in peaceful company Max. Though older now, still perked up when someone dropped a crumb and wagged his tail at every guest like they were old friends. And when the power went out during a summer storm, everyone stayed, lighting candles and singing songs while the rain drummed softly on the windows. And for those few hours, no one checked the time or their phones. They just existed together in the glow of good company. When the lights flickered back on the whole cafe, clapped and laughed, and Harold declared it the coziest blackout of the year. And as the seasons turned and people came and went, the Corner Cup Cafe remained a quiet heartbeat in the rhythm of the town. A place where stories were shared in the steam of coffee cups and friendships grew in the warmth between strangers. And if you ever wandered in, lost or tired, or just in need of something soft and human, you'd find Lily and Max in their usual spot, Emma and Ryan finishing each other's crossword answers, Elsie stroking Thomas while flipping pages, and Harold outside tuning his bike bell and smiling like he'd been waiting just for you.